Starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all can hear me out. Today's session would be on NESA compliance management solution, and I just spend some time with a brief about my profile. I have 10 years of experience in cybersecurity. I've worked on multiple areas in cybersecurity, covering security GRC, operation center, building up software security, data security on various aspects of mobile and cloud, and recently on a few industrial control system stuffs as well. I also have worked on many consulting projects, which is roughly over more than 100 now. Currently, I'm heading the consulting practice in Paladion. So that's a very brief overview on who I am and what I do in Paladion. So next 1 hour, this is what I want to focus on. These are the 4 main line items that we would cover today as part of today's webinar. The first thing that we would touch upon is a description of the overall NESA framework. And then the second topic would be on the NESA UAE Information Assurance Standard, which is the main focus for implementation for any entity. And then the third one would be specific on the solution that Paladion brings into the market that can help entities demonstrate their compliance to NESA. And finally, we'll end up with a few broad steps that you as a participant can take home and you can work upon, which can probably give you better clarity on your current compliance status and how you can proceed post this session. So these are the 4 broad areas that I thought I can cover today. We will keep the question answer at the end of this session, so you guys can type down your questions in the chat, and definitely me and my colleague will go through those questions at the end of the session, and I'll try to address as much as possible. So so yeah, you're free to type down your questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer that at the end of the session. So the first topic that we are going to touch upon is a description on overall NESA framework, what all components are there in the NESA, and how should we look at the overall NESA as a framework. So if we spend some time and try to understand why NESA has come as an independent authority in UAE, so the cyberspace and use of IT systems has grown in a big way in UAE. So that's the positive side of usage of cyberspace and IT. But on the negative side, we have seen a couple of recent incidents wherein cyber threats has emerged in a big way, and there are a lot of instances of cyber crime and hacktivisms that we have seen in UAE. But nevertheless, the usage of cyberspace and IT systems is never going to die down. So UAE entities will definitely keep on using it to innovate further their products and services and bring more economic development and build more collaboration. So the positive side is not going to die down, but at the same time, cyberspace is getting exposed to a lot of cyber threats. So that brings in the requirement of improving the national cybersecurity and protecting the information infrastructure that supports the national cyberspace. So that's the main idea behind the evaluation of NESA. So with this objective, UAE government created National Electronic Security Authority, which in short form we call as NESA. And NESA has developed further, the entire framework. So NESA has developed the National Cybersecurity Strategy and the National Information Assurance framework to cater to this requirement of improving the overall national cybersecurity in UAE. So how does this national cybersecurity strategy looks like? So if we can, if we just spend some time and try to understand what is this NCSS, National Cybersecurity Strategy primarily talks about 5 strategic areas. The first area is, preparation and prepare and prevent from cybersecurity threats. So this is where it talks about entities trying understanding their risks and putting down sufficient cybersecurity threats. The second strategic area that NESA talks about is building sufficient capabilities in terms of detecting, responding, and recovering from cyber incidents. The third strategic area that NCSS talks about is building national capabilities by promoting cybersecurity awareness and developing a UAE workforce in cybersecurity and information security requirements, and also cultivate research and innovation to meet the cybersecurity national needs. So that's the third strategic area. The fourth strategic area that it talks about is fostering collaborations within national and international levels, so that due to this cross-border thing in cyberspace, cybercrime can happen from outside the perimeter of UAE, and unless the jurisdictions of that country and the jurisdiction of UAE talks and talks closely to each other, unless they collaborate with each other, we cannot really secure the cyberspace of national cyberspace of UAE. And the fifth strategic area that it talks about is providing national leadership. So since the focus is to secure the national cyberspace, so NESA has come up as a single authority who would orchestrate all sorts of cybersecurity initiatives at the national level. So these are the 5 strategic areas that National Cybersecurity Strategy talks about. So the main focus of NCSS is to secure those information assets which supports the national cyberspace. So when we talk about, we primarily refer to those critical services, national critical services that are provided by certain entities. So these entities are spread across various sectors, which NESA has already named. So this covers telecommunication, financial services, power supply facilities, oil and gas, and many other sectors. And we are going to touch base on that, which all sectors it covers. So the main focus is to secure, the critical information assets from these critical sectors, which primarily supports the national cyberspace. So that's the main focus of NCSS, and it covers both physical and virtual information assets. And what NESA focuses on in terms of information security or cybersecurity is securing the confidentiality of these information assets, then securing the integrity of these information assets, ensuring that these information assets are available when required, ensuring that the communications that are happening on the national cyberspace are well authenticated, and nobody can deny the origin of a data once a communication has happened. So It talks about 5 different areas of security, which includes confidentiality, integrity, availability, authentication, and non-repetition. So all these 5 areas are touched upon by NESA in its various standards. So these critical information assets, in short form, are called as CII in various standards by NESA, and these are the CIIs which supports the critical national services being provided by these critical sectors across UAE. So to secure these CIIs, NESA has put forth process, a 4-step process. These 4 steps consist of conducting a sector baseline. So they have identified 10 critical sectors, and the first step is to create a baseline of these sectors, and the second step is to perform a sector national risk assessment on these sectors, and then going forward defining a comprehensive plan that the sector has to then follow in terms of implementing the security controls. And then finally, the 4th step is continuously monitoring the implementation of these sector plans. So each of these 4 steps are further detailed in terms of what each stakeholder has to do. So by and large, there are 3 different types of stakeholders that NESA has defined. First one is the entity, the operator itself. The second stakeholder is the sector regulator. So every sector would be handled by a sector regulator. And then the third stakeholder is NESA itself. So the overall governance process of NESA has 3 stakeholders, the operator, the entity, and the sector regulator, and then the NESA. So the first step under conducting the sector baseline includes basically prioritizing those sectors which provides those critical national services that forms the national cyberspace of UAE. And then NESA would engage with these sector regulators from each sector, and then set up a sector-specific working group. So the idea is to first prioritize which sectors have to implement NESA, and then engage with the sector regulators of those sectors. Now, if a particular sector doesn't have a identified sector regulator, then what NESA is doing is they're identifying a particular organization who can act as a sector regulator. And then that particular organization will represent as a sector regulator of that sector. And then NESA is forming sector-specific working groups, which is a combination of the entity itself and then the sector regulator. And then the sector-specific working group would work towards identifying the critical national services. So if it's a banking sector, then the banks would form a sector-specific working group, and then this sector-specific working group will identify the critical business, the critical banking services that are provided by the banks in UAE, and though that will become a taxonomy of critical national services for banks. Similarly, if manufacturing sector is there, then there will be a sector-specific working group for manufacturing, and then the entities and the sector regulator of the manufacturing sector would define the taxonomy of critical national services for manufacturing sector, and similarly for oil and gas and other transport organization or electricity and water providers and all that. So there are 10 critical sectors which NESA has already identified, and for each sector they're building a sector-specific working group who would be primarily identifying these critical national services per sector. Once this baseline is done, then what happens is the operator would start identifying the CII information assets. So I'm going to use certain terms interchangeably, like for example, operator and entity is the same thing that I'm referring to. And then apart from operator entity, there is sector regulator, and then there is NESA itself. So in the second step, the first thing that NESA demands is the CII operator or the entity would start identifying the CII information assets that are being used to deliver the critical national services, which are identified in the first phase itself. And then going forward, conducting a threat and vulnerability assessment on those CIIs and develop an operator or entity CII risk assessment, which will be then consolidated by the sector regulator and to form a sector CII risk assessment. So basically two risk assessment, one that would be developed by the entity, which will be called as operator CII risk assessment, which then entity will have to submit to the sector regulator, and then sector regulator will consolidate and prepare the sector CII risk assessment. Now from there, what NESA wants to identify is which are those systemic risks which is present in a particular sector. So systemic risk is something a risk that is applicable to multiple entities within a sector. So let's say 4 or 5 banks have similar kind of risk, then for that particular banking sector, that particular risk becomes a systemic risk, and then similarly for oil and gas or maritime or airline industry. So that's the objective of primarily consolidating operator CII risk assessment into sector CII risk assessment to identify the systemic risk and also the significant risk that can emerge within an individual operator itself. And finally, what NESA would do is they will consolidate this sector CII risk assessment into a national level CII risk assessment to identify the highest level of risks across all sectors. So there will be 2 levels of consolidation of the risk assessment to primarily form first the sector view and then the national view. And then going forward, once those views are done, then NESA would plans to define sector plans. Now the sector plans would require clear list of controls that various operators will have to implement. So for that, NESA has already defined cybersecurity requirements that are applicable to all sectors in terms of NESA UAE IA Standard. Apart from that, NESA is going to also define sector-specific standards, information assurance standards, as well as going forward, if required, there will be service or product-specific IA standards, which would be, let's say, targeted to a manufacturing organization and a particular product and service which may require, a very specific standard to be built so that to secure that particular services and products. So those levels of details are also getting developed as part of the sector specific standards. And finally, based upon those list of controls, then a sector plan will be prepared by the sector regulator. And finally, as part of phase 4, these plans will have to be executed by the CII operator, and then CII operator will have to continuously update the sector regulator on the progress of implementation, and CII operator will have to update NESA, and NESA plans to monitor the implementation of all the controls using 4 levels of monitoring scheme primarily. So first level is reporting, wherein they would ask entities to do a self-assessment and self-reporting. Second level of compliance monitoring is auditing, wherein NESA would ask for evidences for certain controls, and the third level is doing a testing, actually running a test on the control and see how effective it is. And fourth is a higher level of intervention, wherein NESA has the authority to intervene and say that certain risks are not getting mitigated, and it may boil down to certain level of penalties and stuff like that. So this is a complete high-level process that NESA talks about to secure the critical information intersection. Now, supporting this process, there is a big framework that has been put in place, a complete framework that has been put in place. This framework has mainly 5 capabilities. First is the entity context. Second is the sector and national context. Third is the information sharing, because it's a whole universe of UAE entities. So entities will have to share information be it for risks or incidents or progress of implementation. They will have to share knowledge. So the third capability is about information sharing. Fourth capability is about the standards that NESA has already built or is in the process of building. And then finally, the overall governance framework in terms of monitoring this, implementation of this national information assurance framework. So this framework is called as National Information Assurance Framework, in short, NIAF. So I'll quickly spend some time and try to explain what are these five capabilities. So the first two capabilities, entity context and sector and national context. So the first one on the left side is the entity context. And as part of this capability, what it talks about is entity must identify the assets and then do a risk assessment for those assets. And based upon the risk assessment, then entity will have to implement three different types of security controls, which will comprise of logical controls like your monitoring controls, endpoint security controls, network security controls, or procedural controls. Physical controls, which would primarily include securing your physical premises with security guards and all that. Also probably physical access control devices, and then finally the third one is personal security, which includes ensuring that your employees are getting securely hired, and their on-job responsibilities are being properly managed, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the third one is each entity must develop a cybersecurity incident detection response capabilities, and then each entity must have the process and communication channels for incident escalation to sector or national level. So it talks about a whole process that entity will have to put in place to detect, respond, and finally, if required, escalate to the sector or national level. And also the fourth one is having the business continuity plan in place for each entity. So that's the entity context. On the sector and national context are the similar areas, but it primarily complements the entity context. So entity does risk assessment, and then the sector regulator primarily consolidates those entity risk assessment and forms a sector CII risk assessment, and finally NESA consolidate the sector CII risk assessments and form a national CII risk assessment. So, it complements the risk assessment of the entity. Then the second one is UAE national cybersecurity capabilities. NESA will facilitate the implementing entities with information on security capabilities developed by other entities. So one entity seeking support or ideas in implementing a particular security control, NESA would provide those kinds of information support. As well as NESA would also develop certain products with national level research programs, which then can be used by entities to implement their compliance. NESA can also provide security clearance to critical personnel if at all is required. So when the implementation of logical, physical, and personal security controls will be done by the entities, NESA would facilitate them with all these various things. Similarly, on the incident management side, NESA will facilitate sector and national level awareness by providing a trusted information sharing capability. So as I said, NESA is going to build this information sharing capability, which then entities would be will be using it to share their implementation progress, their risk assessment results, because that ultimately has to be consolidated into sector level as well as national level. Then they would also be using it for sharing cybersecurity incident related information. And this is going to be a very secure way of sharing information at the national level. And finally, to support the business continuity program of entity, NESA will provide guidance in terms of how to calculate the RPO and RTO of the critical national services, how to evaluate the DA requirements of systems that are supporting critical national services, as well as what needs to be reported when returning the critical national services to a stable state. So on one hand, you have the entity context, which is what all entities within each sector will have to implement. And on the other hand, you have the sector and national context capabilities, which is primarily complementing the entity context capabilities. The third one, which we spoke about, is the information sharing capability that NESA is building. So the objective of this information sharing capability is to distribute cybersecurity information and information security best practices between participating stakeholders. So we have three levels of stakeholders, NESA itself, and then the sector regulators of each sector, and then the entities of each sector, entity or operator of each sector. So these three levels of stakeholders would be using a secure platform to share and consolidate information. So entity would be reporting key information in terms of state of its implementation, risk assessment results, as well as cybersecurity threats and incidents detail, which then sector regulator will consolidate and then form a sector level CII risk assessment results, as well as sector level standard implementation progress, as well as sector level threats and incidents that we have seen, which will then be finally consolidated by NESA to form the national level view of the risk and incidents and threats. And then finally, the same information sharing capability will be used by NESA to provide guidance to the sector regulator. So based upon the results of risks and based upon the information shared in terms of cybersecurity incidents, NESA will provide guidance using the same information sharing capability to the sector regulator and from sector regulator to the entity. So this is going to be a core capability for the entire NESA program to work smoothly. And finally, the fourth and fifth capability is about having the right set of standards. So NESA is going to define, again, three levels of standards. The first one is already defined. There are the progress, the second set of standards are getting developed, which is the sector-specific standards, which will be primarily subjected to a specific sector. Let's say, for example, electricity and water authorities might require certain specific standards to secure their industrial control system, which may require or which will require controls that are different from normal IT network. So definitely we would see sector-specific standards related to OT networks. There could be also sector specific. There could be also service and product specific standard, which is the third category. So which will be primarily for organizations who are delivering very specific set of services and products and may need controls that are very related to those products and services. So there will be three different levels of standards. First level is already defined with the UAEIA IA Standard. The sector-specific standards are getting developed, and then the service and product-specific standards would be ad hoc developed based upon the requirements. And finally, on the fifth capability, which is the overall governance framework, as I've explained, there will be four different levels of monitoring. First is, I guess, all our participants may have already gone through it, self-assessment report, in terms of benchmarking your current capabilities vis-a-vis all the 188 controls of UAEIA Standard. And the second level is, actually asking for the evidences against your compliance reporting. And then the third level is when appropriate, NESA can commission a test of information security measures in place with the entities. And in extreme cases, which is the fourth level, NESA may directly intervene when an entity's activities are consistently leading to unacceptable national security risks. So, which is an extreme case. We believe no entity should reach that level once they properly implement NESA. So the applicability of NIAF is mandatory for all UAE government entities. So that's the first point. It is mandatory for all UAE government entities. Then it is made mandatory for critical entities, which are identified by NESA. So there are handpicked entities within each sector that has been identified as a critical entity, and they have been mandated to do NESA. And I believe the participants here today have such mandate, and that's why you would probably be interested in terms of how to implement NESA. The process of NESA to designate an entity as critical entity is clearly outlined in a document called CII policy, Critical Information Infrastructure Protection. And a lot of these discussion points which we are going through today have been taken from the CII policy as well as the NIAF document itself. So once you get some time and if you go through this document, you will probably be able to understand much more detail about what we have just spoken today. So there are 10 critical sectors that has been identified by NESA, which includes electricity and water sector, oil and gas sector, financial sectors, nuclear sector, information and communication technology sector, health sector, transportation sectors, chemical sector, emergency services sector, and government's services, which is the primary mandate, and then all entities within various other sectors are also being mandated based upon their criticalness. What NESA has done is they have also identified the subsectors within each sector, which they have identified them as a critical stakeholder of the national cyberspace. So basically all the entities, more or less all the entities and operators within these subsectors are being mandated for NESA compliance. So operators or entities within basic chemicals subsector or specialty subsector, as well as emergency and rescue service subsector and law enforcement, then within health sector, medical services subsector, and laboratories are being mandated. Then in nuclear sector, reactors, materials, waste subsectors are being mandated. Within government, the National Public Administration, ambit public administration, education and research sectors are being mandated. Within electricity, right from generation, transmission, distribution, all sorts of entities are being mandated. Within public water supply and public sewage disposal, entities are being mandated. Similarly, on financial, the entire BFSI entities are being mandated. Within ICT, the IT companies, telecommunication companies, satellite companies, media and broadcasting companies are also being mandated for NESA. Now, all these this mandate is going to happen in a phased manner. The idea is not to approach all the entities within a subsector at one go. The idea is to go in a phase-wise manner. So, so what we have discussed so far, you can have more details of these from different documents which forms part of the NIAF framework. So at the high level, NESA has defined the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which we have touched upon, and it talks about 5 strategic focus areas. And then to support NCSS implementation, NESA has defined an NIAF, which talks about those 5 core capabilities which you have seen. And then to roll out those 5 core capabilities, multiple different standards that NESA has defined. So we have spoken about entity context as the first capability, then we have spoken about sector national context, then you have spoken about information sharing capability, then you have spoken about national UAE standards, and then finally IA governance model. So for each of these core capabilities, NESA has defined certain standards. Sector-specific standards and product service-specific standards are yet to be developed and rolled out, so it's still in that to-be defined stage. But for sector and national context, UAE National Risk Management Framework that all entities should use so that the results of risk assessment look similar, and then it can be consolidated at the sector and national level. Then they've defined national cyber risk response framework. So once a cyber security incident happens, how one should detect and respond to those incidents. Then they have defined the CII policy. In terms of information sharing, they have defined a national cyber security information sharing policy. and they are going to build this whole capability in terms of to share the risk, incident, and progress details. On the national standard, we already have the UAEIA standard, which is our main focus, and then framework for compliance, certification, and accreditation process. So the process that NESA is going to follow for compliance, certification, and accreditation has been defined in a separate document. And then finally, we have the governance model, which talks about those 4 different steps of monitoring NESA compliance. So the main standard to focus for implementation for all of us is these 3 standards primarily. So even if you don't go through all the publications of NESA, I think these are the 3 main standards or documents that we need to pick up, and we need to thoroughly understand these. So first is NESA UAE IA Standard, which is the heart and soul of the NESA rollout requirements, and then we have the National Risk Management Framework, which talks about how to do risk assessment at the operator or entity level, and how that would be then rolled out by, how that would be then used by sector and sector regulator and NESA to consolidate the risk assessment results. And then the National Cyber Risk Response Framework is something that we need to take into account when defining the cybersecurity incident detection, response, and recovery process for each and every entity. Other documents are also equally important to understand, but more from the overall understanding of NIAF framework. But these 3 is something that we need to pick up and we need to understand thoroughly to comply with NESA. So the second topic of today's discussion is to understand the NESA UAE IA Standard thoroughly. So the next 10 minutes of our discussion will be focused on understanding the NESA UAE IA Standard, which has primarily 2 families of security controls. First one is management security control, and the second one is technical security controls. These are called as control family. So on a broad level, NESA UAE IA Standard has 2 control family: management control family and technical control family. Under management control family, there are 6 different families, and then under technical control family, there are 9 different families of control. So the 6 different families of controls are like strategy and planning, information security, risk management, awareness and training, human resource security, compliance requirements, performance evaluation and improvement. On the technical control family, the 9 control families are asset management, physical and environmental security, operations management, communications, access control security, third-party security, secure development process, cybersecurity incident management, and then information systems continuity management. The standard is further structured into control subfamilies. So each of these 15 family of control that you can see here has been further divided into multiple subfamilies. So like for example, strategy and planning would have one subfamily as context and leadership. The next subfamily would be information security policy. So there are multiple subfamilies within these control family, and then within each subfamily, then there is a plethora of security controls that that NESA has defined. For each control, then they also have listed down subcontrols. So you may have a control called access control, but within that the subcontrol will be user registration, privilege management. Then other controls could be stale account review. So there could be number of subcontrols supporting each control. And once you are implementing a control, you have to ensure that all subcontrols you have identified. And NESA has defined these subcontrols to a lot of granular level, which we'll see with some examples today. So there are 2 types of control that NESA talks about. One, and these are the 2 main terms that we all have to understand. One is applicability of a security control, and the second one is priority of a security control. So all security controls specified in UAEIA standard are divided into two categories. One is always applicable control. So security controls that represent requirements for instituting foundational IA capabilities within an entity are called always applicable. So which means you cannot omit those controls, and that becomes an unacceptable thing for NESA. And then the second type of control is applicable based upon risk assessment. So these are the security controls that depends upon your risk assessment results. So you can exclude those controls, but you need to justify with proper evidences when the compliance process is happening. So there are 34 security controls that are marked as always applicable. So so there is no way you can say you will not implement those 34 security controls. You have to implement those 34 security controls. On the other hand, NESA has defined priorities for security controls based upon how many threats they mitigate, and what is their impact in terms of building the foundational information assurance capability within an entity. So 188 controls has been divided into 4 priorities: P1 control, P2 control, P3 control, and P4 control. And these are the different counts of controls within each category of priorities. So while all applicable security controls across the 4 priority levels are mandatory for critical entities, they are required to begin the implementation with the P1 control. So every entity have to target P1 controls first, and then probably move on with P2 and P3 and P4. But the main focus should be to start with P1 control. So that NESA is already prescribed. And secondly, there is no way you can say no to 34 security controls which are marked as always applicable. So that has to be implemented by all entities. Now, when you are implementing, you are always bothered about which control to be implemented. So there is no way you can deprioritize P1 control. It has to be implemented first. But then P2, P3, P4 controls, you can always, you can promote certain controls to the higher priority, you can demote certain controls to the higher priority, which is permitted, but P1 control has to be done as a first step. So that is the main start point, we believe, for entities who are trying to implement, which is you target your P1 control, you implement them, and then move on to P2 controls. And within P1 controls, you have to first target the always applicable control. With our understanding of NESA, most of the P1 controls are marked as always applicable controls. So most of the 34 controls are part of the P1 control. So that is where your foundational IA capabilities will get implemented. So some procedural controls from UAEIA standard, although it's not an exhaustive view in any sense. It's a very brief overview about various procedural controls that UAEIA standard talks about. So under strategy and planning family, it talks about sub-families of controls related to leadership and management, roles and responsibility of information security. In terms of information security risk management, it talks about controls related to information security risk identification, risk analysis. Then in human resource security, it talks about controls, procedural controls related to termination responsibility. When a user leaves an organization, how do you remove his or her access rights? On the operations management, it talks about security controls related to backup and restore of your information systems. Then it talks about monitoring the information systems in terms of monitoring the cybersecurity incidents that may be happening within the information systems. Then in the access control, it talks about procedural controls in terms of user registration, and then it also talks about procedural controls in terms of reviewing the user access rights, taking into account stuff like stale account review, whenever a person getting transferred from one department to another department, whether his or her existing control is getting deprovisioned before new set of rights being given to him or her as part of their new role. Then on the communication security, it talks about securing the information transfer procedures, which could be related to transfer mechanisms between two information systems, or it could also be related to email security. On the electronic commerce side, it talks about various things related to how do you secure your e-commerce transactions in terms of integrity and confidentiality of information that is being published on e-commerce sites. So these are a very high-level snapshot of the procedural controls from UAEIA standard. Some suggested technology controls from UAEIA standards. This is again not a very exhaustive list, but we thought it might bring in some idea to our current participants today. So it talks about multiple different technology platforms. But again, the point that I would like to emphasize here that none of these technology platforms are mentioned as mandatory by NESA. These are provided as an implementation guidance, or these are provided as an automation guidance, but these are not not something that NESA is saying you have to implement. But practically, if you look at it, the controls that NESA is demanding you to implement, probably you can smoothly implement those controls using these kinds of technologies. And most of these technologies are being named in NESA UAE IA Standard. So it talks about things like document management system, risk assessment and treatment tool, compliance automation tool, asset discovery tool, asset management systems, removable media device management system, going forward, desktop image management solutions, configuration review tools, endpoint protection solutions, honeypot for malware detection, backup and restoration solution. On the network side, network time synchronization tool, firewall, access control for switches, routers, firewalls. On the wireless network security side, then VPN for secure remote connections. Then on the access control side, secure login mechanism with even 2FS are being mentioned there. Then it also talks about network access control solutions, which ensures that only a permitted device can connect to your network. Then it talks about application security testing tools in terms of secure code reviews, web application security scanning tools. Also, it talks about software test management tools, identity management systems, file integrity monitoring systems, SIM solutions, DLP, vulnerability scanners, MDM solutions for mobile devices and BYOD devices. Then it talks about incident management solution, as well as cryptographic solutions for e-commerce sites, as well as databases and stuff like that. So whole plethora of technology is being mentioned. Although again, I would like to emphasize the point here is none of these are mandatory. None of these are being mentioned as something that an entity will have to implement to show compliance. But when you see each and every control, to implement those controls in a smooth manner, we believe these controls would help you to achieve faster compliance. Now, with these, with these in background, with these controls in background, I thought, maybe to get a practical idea of how does this implementation would look like, if you just take an IT network, on the network side, you are talking about network firewalls, access control lists on switches, routers, firewalls, segregation of network, which is one of the major control within NESA, having intrusion prevention systems, wireless network security, virtual private security incident and event management systems, vulnerability scanners, configuration management, as well as review tools, encryption tools are being mentioned as a network control. On the server side or on the endpoint side, endpoint protection, which includes AV, host IDS, host firewall, removable media device management, application security testing tools, identity management systems, file integrity monitoring systems. A whole lot of things are being defined for the server security. On the endpoint security side, desktop image management solutions, removable media device management solution, endpoint protection solution, DLP agents, mobile device management solutions are being mentioned as a technology control. On the other security control side, of course, risk assessment and treatment tools for the entire network, compliance automation tool, asset discovery tool, physical access control devices, building physical security systems, building environmental control systems, high availability and disaster recovery systems, procedural controls in terms of access control control, incident management, log monitoring, then structural controls in terms of ownership, commitment, roles and responsibilities, and stuff like that, which are a little bit easier to implement, but there are a lot of emphasis being given on the technology side by NESA. Now, for those participants who are having who needs to implement controls on their ICS network, which is the OT side of it, operational technology side of it. So normally an operational technology network would look like this. On your left hand side, you have the SCADA systems, which primarily provide supervisory control messages to the PLCs. So on the right hand side you have the PLCs, and on the left hand side you have the SCADA. So most of the time we have seen that to secure endpoints on the SCADA side, we need desktop image management solutions, removable media device management solutions, data leakage prevention agents, internet access control, because SCADA network is by default is a very sensitive area, and you need to control the internet access properly, wireless access properly. Then domain authentications, SCADA networks does need to follow domain authentication protocols as well. On the server security side, again, a whole bunch of technologies that we can speak about. On the network side, access control lists on the switches, routers, and firewalls, network firewalls, segregation on network, virtual private networks, SIM solutions, vulnerability scanners for the SCADA systems. On the PLC network side, there are a couple of solutions that as an entity we can look at, which is configuration review tools for the PLC systems, as well as network packet integrity monitoring tools. So what happens is the SCADA system sends a lot of supervisory messages to the PLC network. Now, these two sites could be connected over a lease line, or could be connected nowadays even on the internet. So we need to really monitor what packet is coming from the SCADA and what packet is finally going and ending on a PLC device. And finally, the SIM solution is something that we need to look at. So that provides you a high-level idea about the UAE IA standard. So far we have spoken about the overall NESA framework, and then we have seen we have got some idea on the type of management and technical control that UAE IA standard talks about, and which is our primary focus. So with that in background, Paladion brings in the NESA compliance management solution, which is a one-stop solution for all entities. There are 5 different solution components within NESA-CMS package. So the first component is manage NESA GRC, which has got 3 subcomponents: NESA GRC implementation, NESA compliance audit support, and ongoing sustenance of NESA GRC. The second solution component includes managed network security. So we can provide this as a solution on an OPEX model, wherein you don't have to spend anything on the technology bit. We bring the technology and we provide it as a service to entities. So managed network security in terms of securing your perimeters, in terms of securing your web proxies, ensuring building URL filters, securing your Wi-Fi's, and securing remote user access to your network. Then the third component is on the endpoint side, so building endpoint protection, providing DLP, managing your patches, managing backup of your endpoints, which primarily includes the server as well as the desktop and laptop, and client VPN connections. On the fourth component is managed mobile device security, which includes mobile device management, mobile application management, mobile email management, mobile browsing management, and mobile endpoint protection. The fifth component is managed security testing and monitoring, wherein we can provide you this on a routine basis as a service, which includes security testing, security log collection and analysis, log retention, security incident management, brand monitoring. So all these can be provided as a service, and this NESA CMS package can be taken as one-stop solution to show compliance to the NESA requirement. a little bit detail on each of these 5 components. So we have these 5 components, and Paladion also provides the implementing entities with the flexibility to choose the desired solution component as per their business and compliance requirements. So the solution component one is about managed NESA GRC. It includes 4 phases, and this is our implementation approach. So phase 1 is where we identify the critical services. Phase 2 is where we do a gap and risk assessment, and phase 3 is where we develop controls and help you implement those controls, and phase 4 is where we do a control effectiveness check and a pre-audit before you are getting ready for the NESA compliance. Now, phase 1 includes multiple activities like project planning, high-level organization understanding, wherein we try to understand your overall organization, and then we identify the critical business services, which ideally you should have done much before the onset of the project, because that primarily sets the further requirement of the project. So identification of critical business services, identification of critical information infrastructure, which are supporting those critical national services. And then in phase 2, we assess or we benchmark your existing security controls vis-a-vis NESA UAE IA Standard, which we have just seen. And then we assess the threats and vulnerabilities that can exploit those gaps, and then identify the cybersecurity controls that will reduce the identified risks, and define a detailed NESA implementation roadmap. And then phase 3 is where we first focus on P1 controls as NESA wants. So we prioritize development of P1 control, then we implement P1 control, and then we develop P2 control, and then implement P2 control, and so on and so forth for P3 and P4 control. And as part of this phase 3, we also conduct comprehensive security awareness programs. On phase 4, after we have done the development and implementation, we assess your performance of the implemented control, conduct a pre-compliance audit, and then assist your organization in meeting compliance to NESA requirements during the compliance audit. That's an optional part. You may want us to involve during the compliance audit as well. Now, since compliance to NESA is not the end of the journey, but it essentially is the beginning of the journey, and we need to maintain the NESA compliance on an ongoing basis. So again, Paladion provides you this with continuous support. So continuous assessments, which includes asset register preparation, continuous cybersecurity risk assessment, continuous vendor assessments, continuous data classification. Then we help you with regular NESA document updates. Then we provide regular security awareness sessions and the process awareness sessions. Also, in terms of implementation, we regularly help you in terms of supervising your implementations and updating your management. And on the validation side, we continuously do maturity assessments. We can do periodic internal audits as part of our program, and then we support you during the further surveillance audits by NESA. So all this, the entire program is delivered in a service model, and then we use our enterprise risk view GRC portal to deliver this as a service. On solution component 2, which is managed network security, we bring in this as again a service where you don't have to spend anything in terms of technology. Rather, we bring this technology and we provide this as a service, which is completely fully managed service, and it's on a continuous 24/7, wherein we monitor these devices and we ensure that these devices are properly configured to your requirement, and which primarily can help you demonstrate your compliance to NESA. So we cover a plethora of network security devices. We can provide you firewall IPS as part of this, and on a managed mode, we can provide you gateway antivirus controls. We can provide you URL filter controls. We can provide you VPN. We do botnet filtering. We can build in proxy for you at the network level. We can build in Wi-Fi security things, and then finally, all of these we manage through a single portal, which is of course visible to you, so you can at any point in time download reports and dashboards for your management, for your compliance reporting. So all these in a pure managed mode is what we provide, so that you can you can quickly demonstrate your compliance to NESA in terms of all sorts of network security requirements. On solution component 3, we bring in the endpoint security requirement of NESA, which talks about endpoint security controls in terms of antivirus, anti-malware, firewall on the endpoints, device control on the endpoints, application control on the endpoints, patch management of the endpoints, backup and recovery of the endpoints, and having, of course, the overall inventory of your endpoints. So all that, again, in a pure service mode with a full control and full visibility of these technologies through a Paladion portal. Again, you will have flexibility on a 24/7 to download reports and dashboards through our portal and understand your requirements. So this again is a very quick service that you can avail from Paladion to quickly demonstrate your compliance to NESA. On solution component 4, we can help you manage your mobile device security. Again, we bring in all required solutions that you need to have in place to demonstrate your compliance. So mobile device management, mobile application management, email securities within mobile devices, controlling the user's browsing on mobile devices. If you have mobile kiosks, we can manage that as well as containerization and application wrapping features can bring in. We can also help you do BYOD management of your users' devices. So again, all this are delivered in a service mode, which can help you demonstrate your compliance to NESA very quickly. The last one, solution component 5, is about security testing and monitoring in a managed mode. Again, as part of this service, we completely meet your compliance requirement in terms of security monitoring with continuous log collection, log analysis, log retention, multiple device platform support. We provide you incident management support. In terms of security testing, we do regular security testing, like for example, code review, application security review, configuration review, penetration testing of your network. So all these again will be delivered to you on a pure service mode, wherein there is no capex for you and everything is OPEX, and it becomes a very quick mode of demonstrating your compliance to NESA. So with these things in background, we have come to an end to today's session. We have understood what NESA overall framework is, and we have also understood what all management and technical controls that NESA UAE IA Standard talks about, and then we have seen how Paladion can help you with its NESA-CMS package to show your compliance quickly to NESA requirements. So I just want to wrap up to this session with two steps that you can take as a next step to proceed from here onwards. The first one is that probably this you have already done. You already know your compliance level, but for those participants who may not have done any kind of compliance check against NESA UAE IA Standard, as a continuation to today's session, we are going to send you a tool, a very easy to use tool that you can use to check your compliance against NESA UAE Standard. So we are going to send you a tool that will have very short questions against various families and subfamilies of NESA, and then you will have questions, and you can rate yourself in a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being the lowest and then 5 being the highest, fully compliant. You can rate yourself by just reading through those easy to read questions. For the management control family as well as for the technical control family, similar structure will be provided to you, and then once your responses are provided, this tool will basically generate a compliance indicator for you, which will show you where do you stand in a scale of 5 against those 15 control families of NESA. So this is one tool that we are going to provide to you so that you can check your compliance post this session. Probably it will take and half an hour dedicated time from your side, spend some half an hour, and then you would get to know at a high level where do you stand in terms of NESA. The second thing is, if you are thinking how to scope the project, we think these are the steps that you can look at. As an output of this session, we're going to provide you a NESA scoping questionnaire that you can fill and send it to us, and then we can help you out with the estimate of how much time and stuff like that you would need for this project. So the first step when you're scoping a project for NESA compliance, the first thing is you need to identify your critical business services. You may have already identified the critical business services if your entity is already listed with one of the sector-specific working group which you have spoken in the beginning. Or if you have worked with authorized person from NESA to identify the critical business services. It could be both way. It could be that your entity is already listed with the sector-specific work group and you have already identified your critical business services as part of building the taxonomy of that sector, or you have probably worked one-on-one with one of the authorized person from NESA. So if you know the critical business services, then that's your first milestone. You have already achieved your first milestone, and that's a critical milestone, and that can help you further scoping the project. So once you are done with that, then you need to decide whether your entity is planning to go for a phased approach for implementation in order of priority of the security control. Are you going to first target P1, P2, P3, P4 in a phased manner in different projects, or are you going to go ahead with a single project plan? Which means, are you going to target all P1 to P4 in a single project plan, or are you going to treat these as a separate project? That's the second step. So first step is identify your critical business services. Second step is decide whether you want to treat P1, P2, P3, P4 control as separate project or one project. Third step is decide whether your entity is planning to implement NESA for the IT and OT network, if that is applicable in two different projects. For those participants who are not accountable for OT network, of course, this decision factor doesn't really required for you, but those participants who also needs to think about OT network, then probably this is one of the critical deciding factor. You decide whether you want to first start with IT and then go to OT, or do you want to treat this as a single project. And finally, the fourth deciding factor for before you look at any vendor is what level of support do you want? Do you want support only in terms of assessing and telling you where you exactly are and then doing a risk assessment, or do you need further support in terms of documentation, or do you need further support in terms of process implementation, which could be in terms of process, technology, doing training and awareness, and then finally support for maintenance. Again, it's not a one-time exercise. The journey begins with the compliance. So you have to maintain your compliance on an ongoing basis, and this monitoring program from NESA is not going to be one-time exercise. It's going to be a continuous exercise. So on a continuous basis, you will have to demonstrate your compliance to NESA. So that's the fourth deciding factor basically you have to look at. So what we are going to leave you with is these two tools. One tool which will probably help you on where do you stand at this point in time vis-a-vis NESA, and secondly the scoping questionnaire, which will help you to get a estimation from our side in terms of how much time you would need to spend in a project like this. So these are the two tools that we are going to send it to you, and we hope that you would work on these two tools and you will come back to us with your feedback. So thank you very much again for all your time and attendance today. I hope this webinar was fruitful to you. I hope you have learned something in terms of NESA. So I know I have already crossed my time. It's already 1 hour, almost 10 minutes. So I'm going to look at if I have got some questions here. Okay, so I have one question that I can see in the chat window, which is, does Paladion provide certification and attestation to NESA? Well, we are not, we are implementation partner for you, so we can help you implement all the security controls so that you are ready for compliance with NESA. So we will do everything from A to Z in terms of assessing your current compliance, implementing all the controls that would be required for you to show compliance, and finally the actual assessment will be done by NESA itself. There is nobody else who is authorized to do those assessments. So compliance assessment, the final compliance assessment will come from NESA. You can look at us as the implementation partner, who will be with you from first day to the last day till you get certified. I hope that answers the question. So probably I'm going to wait for a minute before we can wind up. It's 5:10, so maybe we'll wrap up this session by 5:11. So if you have some questions, please type it down and I'll answer that. Unless otherwise, I hope you have this session was fruitful to you and you would come back to us with your feedback. Okay, so I see one more question here. Do you consolidate or mapping sheet for 27,000 on NESA, ISR, PCI? All right, so the question, if I can understand, do we do consolidation and mapping for 4 different standards? Yes, we can do that. We have large amount of certification experience for ISO 27001. We have large amount of PCI DSS experience. We also understand ISR very well, so we can map all the controls of these 4 standards and benchmark you against these 4 standards in one single gap assessment activity. Yes, so if that's the requirement from your side, we can always map. In fact, that's a knowledge base that we already have, and we can use it to benchmark you against these 4 standards with a single gap assessment activity. Okay, there is one more question. Does NESA specifies timelines to implement controls? Well, what we hear from the market, and there's a very good question, in fact, what we hear from the market is those entities who have been already mandated across various sectors to show compliance. I think we are looking at this year end to show compliance. So all these entities will have to show their compliance in terms of P1, P2, P3, P4 controls by this year end. So this is what we hear from the market. So yes, there are specific timelines being sent by NESA for entities. As and when they are handpicking entities, they are setting a timeline for them. So there is one more question. Do you have anything in hand that can share with us? Yes, of course. So as I said, as a output of this session, or as a follow-up of this session, you will receive an email from our side which will have those 2 tools. One is the current compliance assessment tool, and secondly the scoping questionnaire tool. Along with that, you will also get a guide in terms of how to show NESA compliance. So yes, we are going to provide you certain things that you can work on, and then probably come back to us with your feedback. And we look forward from your side in terms of if you can fill up those things and send it to us, it will really help us to come back to you with further estimations. There's one more question, which is performing national risk management framework based risk assessment is mandatory or comply to IA control is enough by end of 2016. Okay, so there's a question which is about, do we need to perform risk assessment based upon an NCRMF framework or comply with IA control is enough by end of 2016. Okay, so basically we have to understand that before you implement a control, you have to do risk assessment. Now, what if you don't do risk assessment? Now, this has been clearly mentioned by NESA in its UAEIA Standard, and if you read it, you will understand it. What it says is an entity must perform risk assessment, and then based upon the risk assessment, it should plan its implementation. And it says that the always applicable control cannot be omitted. You have to implement those 34 always applicable control, but you have a choice to omit certain controls apart from those 34 controls, which you can justify as part of risk assessment. So if you do risk assessment, you will have an option to say that my entity doesn't need this control, and you can justify that. But if you don't do risk assessment, then what NESA very clearly mentions in UAEIA standard is you have to implement all in 188 controls. So you will not have any options to say this particular control is not relevant to me, so I don't have to implement it. So for example, there is a lot of focus in terms of cryptographic control. Now, as an entity, do you need cryptographic control? Unless you do a risk assessment of your information system, and you think or you've identified that okay, I have information systems, but these systems are not really connected to cyberspace, and it's not publishing any information publicly. It's not connected to internet. So do I need to think about cryptography? Uh, and for example, it emphasizes on mobile device security. Now, if you disallow mobile devices within your organization, then do you need to really think about controls related to mobile device security? So there are a lot of controls within these 188 controls which are subjected to your risk assessment results. So if you do risk assessment, you will be able to prioritize your controls. You will be able to put a very practical implementation plan. If you don't do, then you have just one choice: implement all 188 controls. Okay, I have one more question. After self-assessment is carried out, what is the process to get certificate from NESA? All right, so it's an important question, I believe. Now, there are certain terminologies that we need to understand. As part of the compliance process of NESA, NESA says there is a 4 level of compliance assessment. First assessment is reporting, which is self-assessment. Second step of compliance assessment is auditing, which is where they would ask for evidences. So if you're saying you are compliant with a certain requirement, they may ask for an evidence. So that's the second level of compliance reporting. The third level is testing, which is where if you are saying that yes, I have a 24/7 SIM monitoring, they would probably test that. So that's a testing, not an auditing, not a reporting, that's actual testing. The fourth level is where intervention happens from NESA, and then they may even get down to the level of penalties and stuff like that. So that's a very extreme end, the fourth end. Now, in all these 4 levels of compliance check, there is no mention about certification. Certification, like if you are referring to ISO 27000 or PCI DSS or any other security certificate that you're looking at, it's not like that. So in NESA, certification or accreditation or compliance certification and accreditation is a separate process. It is meant for certain specific products and services which NESA might mandate an entity to go for a certification before they can launch the products and services. So you are not going to get a certificate by showing your compliance, but because you are identified as a critical entity and because you are identified as an owner of a critical as an owner of critical national services, you are bound to show compliance to NESA's requirement because you are delivering services which are critical to the nation. So you need to secure your critical services. So that is the whole idea. Certificate is not the idea in this entire program. Certificate is meant for certain specific cases only, and it is not meant for all entities, and it is not part of the general compliance assessment program. I hope I have answered your question. Okay, I have one more question, which is what is the major difference between NESA RA and the one suggested by 27,000. Okay. So now, that's a very good question, in fact. Now NESA, in the NESA risk management methodology, if you see, it's a service-based risk assessment. So what they're saying is you identify the national critical services, and then you identify the CII, which is supporting those national critical services, and then you identify the business impacts or the impact of confidentiality loss, integrity loss, availability loss, or the impact of authentication, wrong authentication, impact of impact to non-repudiation and all that. So it is asking you to do a business impact of losses to those CIIs which you have identified, and then you need to identify your threat exposure of your information assets, and then you need to identify what is the likelihood of a threat exploiting those vulnerabilities. So at the end, you will come down to assets, and from their assets you will have to identify the threats and vulnerabilities. So there, so you would probably link it to an asset-based risk assessment like the way you are doing in 27001. But the important point here to underline is, in ISO 27001, you can create a scope and you can say, I would do ISO 27001 for my data center only, or I will do ISO 27001 for my IT department. You are not looking from the business point of view, but in NESA, you are going to look at from the business point of view. You are going to identify the services first, which are critical to the nation, and then you are going to identify the critical information assets which are supporting those services, and then from there onwards, you are going to do the threat and vulnerability analysis, and then define a risk score. And the NCRMF methodology defines the whole thing. I hope I have answered this question. Okay, so I think we are done with all the questions. So thank you very much for your participation. I hope you are taking away some positive things from this session, and I hope that you would go through our tools that we are going to send out to you as an output of this session. And I hope that we will get to hear from you, your feedbacks and your requirements very soon. So thank you very much for attending this session, and we look forward to hear from you.